Hi, I'm Scott Sipker. Welcome to the beautiful autumn edition of Iowa Outdoors. Coming up in the fall edition of Iowa Outdoors, we'll explore the Loess Hills Scenic Byway. We explored the beauty of thermal flight, high above Iowa in a hot air balloon. Back on the ground, we hit the paved trails of Decorah for an early look at the Trout Run Bike Trail, a scenic journey through one of Iowa's most beautiful regions. Chef John Benedict shares the perfect meal for fall campers when the weather turns chilly, and that's actually a hint. And we'll find out how one photographer is using high dynamic range to share a different perspective of the Iowa landscape. We'll have all that and more, so sit tight. Iowa Outdoors is about to begin.
Funding for Iowa Outdoors was provided through a REAP Conservation Education Program grant. Up to $350,000 are available annually to support educational projects about Iowa's natural resources. Information is available at www.iowadnr.gov. The Gilchrist Foundation, founded by Jocelyn Gilchrist, furthering the philanthropic interest of the Gilchrist family in wildlife and conservation, medical care and social services, the arts and public broadcasting, and disaster relief.
Many of Iowa's natural wonders you'll find on IPTV can be found in Iowa Outdoors magazine, the Iowa DNR's premier resource for conservation, education, and recreation activities. Subscription information can be found online at iowadnr.gov.
Getting there is half the fun. That was a popular advertising slogan by Cunard Cruise Lines in the 1960s. But for Iowa travelers, that message rings true for those who prefer to take the byway over the highway. The Loess Hills Scenic Byway runs closely to this historic monument, built to honor the expedition of Loess and Clark, who passed through this area more than 200 years ago. Their expedition up the Missouri River parallels closely the Loess Hills Scenic Byway. In 1804, the legendary expedition spent more than a month in Iowa, collecting scientific data and meeting with Native Americans. The name Council Bluffs actually comes from the expedition's first meeting with members of the Oto and Missouri tribes. For Loess and Clark, it was the journey of discovery, just like it was for Iowan Paul Yost. The Bristow, Iowa native is known as the father of the modern hot air balloon. Prior to Yost's pioneering approach to air travel, most balloon extended flight required helium or its combustible cousin, hydrogen. But Yost designed and used a propane burner to generate the lifting hot air. The science of thermal flight is fairly simple, just like the reason so many Iowans are drawn to this beautiful airborne spectacle. It's the magic of floating in the breeze, where the journey is the destination. There are three main components to hot air ballooning. There's the envelope, or balloon, the burner, which creates the heat that actually causes the balloon to rise, and the basket, or gondola, which is where the passengers ride. We believe there's an important fourth key ingredient here, the pilot, or the person who's actually flying the balloon.
In the ballooning community, I'm affectionately known as Crazy Al.
Okay, Crazy Al.
But don't let that scare you. I like to see people's eyes light up.
Al Appenzeller, or Crazy Al, started ballooning in 1998. Like most people who are into this lighter-than-air sport, he started as a crew member for another balloonist. After 5 years, he purchased his own balloon and received his private pilot certificate in 2004.
We like to say your first ride is free, your second ride is $30,000 to $40,000. But needless to say, my first ride, I just was hooked. I just knew it was what I wanted to do. And then I crewed for several years until finally I saved up for my first balloon.
The physics of getting a balloon airborne is fairly simple. It begins with filling the envelope with air. Once the balloon is inflated, the burners heat the air inside the envelope so it's 120 to 150 degrees hotter than the ambient air temperature. That causes the air trapped inside the balloon to be less dense or lighter than the surrounding air. By increasing the temperature in the envelope, the balloon rises. By letting the air cool, it descends. The direction a balloon moves is determined by the direction of the wind. However, wind currents flow in different directions at different elevations, so a balloonist can actually control the direction of flight by changing the altitude of the balloon.
I enjoy the feeling you get when you're just floating in the air. It's really indescribable, but it's just so surreal, so peaceful. It's a feeling, but as so often feelings go, it's just not something you can really describe.
Because a balloon moves at the same speed as the wind, the only feeling of movement comes from watching the world pass underneath you. Balloonists actually enjoy their sport year-round. When the outside temperatures are cool, it takes less heat to get the balloon off the ground, and flights in the winter are often longer because it takes less fuel to stay airborne. During the summer, flights usually occur in the early morning or late evening in order to take advantage of not only cooler temperatures and lighter winds, but also to avoid dangerous thermals.
There are over 3,500 balloons and 4,000 licensed pilots in the United States, and somewhere around 1,000 balloons in other countries. Nationwide, there are 46 balloon clubs, with 2 of them being located right here in Iowa. Our flight was just short of an hour. We covered close to 6.5 miles, and our maximum altitude was 850 feet.
Ready?
When it came time to land, with the help of his crew, Al stuck the landing in a parking lot of a grocery store.
Perfect. Couldn't have been better. Awesome.
There's no doubt that Al loves ballooning. And when he's not flying, you might find him sharing what he knows of the sport with people of all ages at the National Hot Air Balloon Museum in Indianola.
I took that first balloon ride and was just captivated and knew that that's what I loved. And you know, it's kind of like then with anything that you love, you want to share that with folks, and you want to help them understand, you know, the passion that you have about it, and maybe that will spark some interest on their part.
The National Hot Air Balloon Museum is a great place to go and learn more about the history of ballooning, and a great initial step in becoming involved in, dare I say, the ups and downs of thermal flight. The Loess Hills that border our state's western edge are a visual and global treasure. Loess soil deposits are found throughout the world, but only Iowa and China are home to Loess soil deposits greater than 200 feet thick. It's said that if you find a rock in the Loess Hills, it was brought there by a human. And that's because Loess soil is as fine as flour. These hills are actually wind-blown glacial deposits. Running from Westfield, Iowa in the north to Mound City, Missouri in the south, the Loess Hills are up to 15 miles wide and 200 miles long. Described as peak and saddle, the hills are well known for their narrow ridges that fall off at steep angles. These cat step terraces are caused by slumping and vertical shearing of the Loess soil. Besides the unusual topography, the hills are the only Iowa home to many animals and plants that are more commonly found in prairie environments much further west. The Broken Kettle grasslands in Plymouth County contain the largest remaining tracts of contiguous native prairie left in the entire state. They are home to Iowa's only remaining population of prairie rattlesnakes. Because of the unique natural, cultural, and historical importance of the hills, as well as the beauty and recreational opportunities they provide, the Loess Hills Scenic Byway was designated a National Scenic Byway by the U.S. Department of Transportation. Every season offers travelers along the byway something different, especially the beauty of an Iowa autumn. And if it's true that getting there is half the fun, then the Loess Hills may be your ideal destination. To celebrate the bicentennial anniversary of the Corps of Discovery's historic journey, cycling advocates created the Loess and Clark bike route. Stretching from Oregon to Montana, down through Iowa and Missouri, this path is a mix of rural highways and paved paths, and it stretches more than 3,000 miles. But if you're searching for a slightly shorter Iowa cycling journey, you might want to head to Decorah, where a multi-million-dollar scenic loop is just about complete. For generations, Iowans have flocked to the beautiful bluffs of northeast Iowa, perhaps to pay a visit to the abundant trout streams or to paddle along the glistening upper Iowa River. Biking in this picturesque landscape has largely been confined to highways or a multitude of mountain bike trails, but community leaders near the city of Decorah had big dreams. Trout Run Trail in the beautiful part of northeast Iowa took $12 million.
And years of planning.
A bike path connecting the outdoor scenery to the quaint downtown experience. A cycling journey for the young and old, experienced and novice, all within the friendly bluffs of Winneshiek County.
We wanted to develop a dedicated trail that was off-road and scenic and safe. And we started looking at maps to find out points of interest that we could, destinations that we could connect. And we ended up talking to landowners. We spent years talking to landowners to get feedback.
After years of planning reached a financial crescendo, construction began on a contiguous paved loop. A master plan was designed for the ideal route, no matter what blocked the path.
I think that we did it very much the hard way. We didn't have a rail bed, other than about a half a mile of rail bed to reclaim. We didn't. We had to create our own rail bed.
Local officials faced many obstacles when building this trail.
Known as the Cut, this passage wasn't here a few years ago. Engineers actually had to blast their way through.
In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Explosive experts blew away massive chunks of this bluff and spent weeks cleaning up the debris before paving a roomy and signature passage. Other sections of this trail run directly beside the water's edge. Trout Run Trail runs 12 miles around the entire city of Decorah, including trips over streams like the Upper Iowa and Trout Run Creek. These streams and rivers are brimming with the region's famously abundant trout, and your cycling journey brings you to the front door of one of the Iowa DNR's most important tools.
Cyclists and walkers can stop by one of the DNR's most productive fish hatcheries, just steps away from the trail. Trout raised here are used to stock dozens of northeast Iowa streams.
Just across the street from the fish hatchery rests the famous Decorah eagle nest. And while those eaglets will surely leave the nest by fall or winter, the next generation could be coming to a webcam or bike trail near you.
Public artwork serves as a cornerstone for the Decorah bike trail system. Artwork like the River Horizon Archway dots the trail.
An Iowa City artist designed this archway based on the memories he had fishing with his grandfather near Decorah's famously abundant trout streams. Besides the obvious connection to trout, this arch symbolizes the gateway between urban and rural sections of the trail. And that's what community leaders wanted all along, a connection with the beauty of Decorah and the downtown businesses that could see an economic boost.
If you're going to build or develop a trail, it's going to take 10 years. You have to be patient. And I think you have to select a route that is worth the investment. The route that's scenic is more to it than just getting from point A to point B. It's also enjoying the scenery along the way. And I think that's one of the things we have going for us here is we have a very wonderful loop, scenic loop that takes on the characteristics that a lot of people like about northeast Iowa.
Songs have been written and competitions have been waged over the cowboy stew known as chili. Will Rogers called chili a bowl of blessedness, and Chef John Benedict has a version that includes bison meat that he's sure you'll find heavenly.
I should get that Dutch oven warmed up here. Well, it's a beautiful day out here in Iowa, and we're going to do some cooking over a campfire today. Today we're going to be making some bison chili, some steakhouse style bison chili. One of the things that I do before I go out camping or have a picnic is I prep everything up that I'm gonna cook ahead of time. And what I mean by that is, all the vegetables that you have to chop for the chili, the onions and the peppers, I go ahead and I pre-chop those and I put them in some baggies so I can bring them out. Whether you like beans in your chili, some people say beans, no beans, it's up to you. But I got the beans, I rinsed them off and put them in some baggies too, so it makes it a lot easier for me to be able to cook and still have fun with the family while we're out camping and having a picnic. The twist today on our chili is gonna be the bison meat that we're gonna be using. It's a healthy alternative to beef and it's not gamey at all, so don't be afraid to use it. Let's get started. Well, our Dutch oven's been heating up now, and the first step into making our chili is gonna be adding our bacon. The bacon's gonna give us the needed fat to be able to cook the bison meat in this Dutch oven. Once our bacon's been cooking for about 5 minutes, we're gonna go ahead and add our bison meat. We've already got it ready to go. We're gonna put it right in the Dutch oven and get it searing along with the rest of the bacon. Well, we got a good start going to our chili here. Go ahead and take this lid off. Wow, that looks great. We're gonna go ahead and start making it look more like a chili now. We're gonna add some the onions I've diced up, a little bit of garlic's in there, and some great fresh bell peppers. Man, it smells great going on this campfire. Once we get all those things in there, we'll just go ahead and give it a good stir, and we're gonna let this cook for about 5 minutes. Well, our peppers and onions have been cooking now with our bison in our Dutch oven, and we're gonna go ahead and check it. Still smelling great and looking good. We're gonna go ahead and add some beans now. Some people don't like beans in their chili, but I like putting a variety of beans, from black beans, kidney beans, and pinto beans. And we're just gonna go ahead and put that right in there. To the chili, we're gonna add a couple cans of crushed tomatoes. I like using crushed tomatoes. It kind of gives it a really smooth consistency in the end. So put a couple cans of that in. And some Worcestershire sauce. Put a few dashes or so. Get all that in there. Give it a good stir. It's really smelling great over this campfire. Well, we're gonna add our seasonings here. I got some chili powder. You can find your best flavored chili powder, the ones you like the most, and I add about a 1/4 cup or so of chili powder. I just picked up something from the store, but a lot of people like to make their own blends of spices and chili powder. One of my favorite ingredients to add to the chili is some brown sugar. I'm gonna go ahead and add a few big pinches to it. Get it stirred in. It adds a kind of unique flavor and a little sweetness to this hearty chili that we're making over the campfire. Go ahead and stir that in. Get my lid back on it. We're gonna let it cook for about 30-35 minutes. If you remember from our previous episodes, we did a little bit of cooking in a pie iron. We're gonna go ahead this time and put some corn muffin batter into our pie iron and cook it right next to our chili over the campfire. Ooh. Chili's ready. Our chili's been cooking now for about 35-40 minutes, and we're gonna go ahead and take it right off our fire, and we're gonna serve it up. How's everybody? Yeah, there's beans in it. We're gonna go ahead and dish it up. Even though this is bison chili, we're gonna treat it just like any other chili. Dish it up with, your favorite toppings like cheese, diced onions, some sour cream. Anybody want some crackers? Please visit our website for this recipe of bison chili.
Over the past 2 years, photographer Ken West has been selected to visually document 5 of Iowa's 9 scenic byways. His imagery of the Loess Hills Scenic Byway is stunning and unique. Ken's images display details that are very difficult to see with the naked eye and impossible to capture with traditional photography. This high-tech approach to natural environments is just one way to entice people to get out and enjoy the view. The photographs that Ken West takes have a surreal look. There is something about them that is not quite natural, something different that people have trouble identifying.
And I think one of the reasons for that is because I use this technique called high dynamic range photography, where I'll take several photographs of the scene, different exposures, allows me to capture a much wider range of brightness. People are not used to seeing that in a photograph. Where they're used to seeing it is in a painting. And so I think that's one of the reasons when people look at the prints, they think, wow, it looks like a painting.
HDR, or high dynamic range photography, actually reduces the contrast between the darkest and lightest areas of a photograph. The process involves taking several photographs of the same subject at different exposures. A computer is then used to merge those separate photographs into a single HDR image.
This is a photograph that I took in the Les Hills National Scenic Byway, which is located in the western part of Iowa. And to take this scene, I used, this is what it would normally look like here. You can see a normal photograph. I would have lost all the detail in the sun and in the sky, and also quite a lot of detail in the deep shadow areas. But by using a combination of 3 different photographs, one where I photograph using more exposure to capture shadow detail, and then 2 photographs where I use less exposure so I can capture all of the detail around the sun and in the sky, and then I merge those all together, and then the result is this photograph called a high dynamic range photograph. It has a painterly quality because, frankly, only a painter could have captured that traditionally.
Ken West has taught photography at the Maharashi University of Management in Fairfield for 5 years, but he has been involved in photography nearly all his life. His great-grandfather had a photography studio in Missouri, but it was Ken's grandfather, who was a portrait photographer and painter, that taught Ken the basics.
Some of my earliest childhood memories are sitting in the darkroom with my grandfather, watching him develop 4x5, 5x7 sheet film in a tray, and then also watching him make prints when I was very small. So my interest developed very naturally and just progressed from there.
Ken says his interest in landscape and nature photography began less than 10 years ago. He credits the Jefferson County trail system for focusing his interest on the environment. For Ken, photography is a means of experiencing the world.
A lot of times I may go out to take photographs and I may not see anything that I want to photograph, but there can still be that silence that you experience walking on a trail. And maybe just I didn't see anything that particular time, so I don't come away with any photographs, but then I enjoyed the experience of being out on the trail and feeling the breeze, feeling the wind, hearing the sounds that you hear, the smells, everything.
On the technical side, it might take Ken as long as 20 seconds to take the 3 to 6 exposures he needs to create a high dynamic range photograph. In order to keep the camera as still as possible, he always uses a tripod, uses a shutter release, and locks the mirror up in the camera to minimize vibration. So that his depth of field will remain the same from photograph to photograph, he brackets his exposure using shutter speed rather than changing the lens aperture.
Many years ago, you were always told to have the sun over your shoulder. And I quickly learned, particularly with HDR, to throw that idea out. I like having the sun a lot of times as part of the composition itself. As a matter of fact, sometimes when I'm photographing the scene, I can't really look at the scene. I have to kind of squint and look at it sideways to frame it in my camera because it's too bright, the sun, to actually look right at it.
The photographs Ken West has taken have been featured in a number of galleries across the state. He has also shown his work and conducted a workshop on HDR photography at the National Center for Nature Photography in Ohio. It is the only gallery in the nation devoted exclusively to landscape and nature photography. The goal of the center is to inspire a reverence for natural environments and to promote the preservation of the natural world. It is a goal that is shared by Ken.
We have a role as stewards to nourish and protect the natural world around us. So I think that's a very important thing that people take away from my photographs. And I'd also like to remind people in Iowa, when they look at the photographs, what a wonderful place Iowa is. And I encourage people to go out on the byways, take a Saturday or a Sunday or a weekend and do a byway trip, pick out one. And I think you'll find that you'll experience some really wonderful natural scenes, natural landscapes that are just exquisite, and you just have to take the time to go out and experience it.
On a historical note, it took Lewis and Clark 34 days to travel up what is now Iowa's western border. Today, you can make that same trip along I-29 in about 2 hours. And that wraps up this edition of Iowa Outdoors. We're going to leave you with a few more images of Iowa's beautiful autumn.
Funding for Iowa Outdoors was provided through a REAP Conservation Education Program grant. Up to $350,000 are available annually to support educational projects about Iowa's natural resources. Information is available at www.iowadnr.gov. The Gilchrist Foundation, founded by Jocelyn Gilchrist, furthering the philanthropic interest of the Gilchrist family in wildlife and conservation, medical care and social services, the arts and public broadcasting, and disaster relief.
Many of Iowa's natural wonders you'll find on IPTV can be found in Iowa Outdoors magazine, the Iowa DNR's premier resource for conservation, education, and recreation activities. Subscription information can be found online at iowadnr.gov.